Hello and welcome to Crosstalk, where all things are considered. I'm Peter Lavelle. The world is struggling in different ways to cope with the COVID-19 pandemic, and governments are taking the heat for their actions and inactions. Will the coronavirus be a referendum on globalization? Cross-talking some real news. I'm joined by my guest here in Moscow, Dmitry Babich. He's a political analyst and editor at InnosMe Internet Media Project. And in London, we cross to Marcus Papadopoulos. He is editor of Politics First magazine. All right, gentlemen, crosstalk rules in effect. That means you can jump in anytime you want, and I always appreciate it. Let me go to Marcus first in London. As this pandemic continues, and there's no end in sight, different countries are experiencing different levels of this pandemic. And there's been pointed out by the media and by people around the world what actions work and what don't work. But there's a much broader discussion that needs to be taken, and that is the nature of globalization and how globalization has allowed a pandemic like this to spread, become a pandemic itself here. And when I say globalization, I'm talking about the nature of trade, borders, the very nature of the nation state, and even talking about sovereignty again, which is foreboded on both sides of the spectrum. But it's something that has to be talked about because at the end of the day, the nation state is required to take care of its own citizens. Your reflection there. Go ahead, Marcus.
Indeed, Peter. One of the consequences of the emergence of the coronavirus has been to shine a light on the dangers of globalization. And that is something, of course, that Western media, principally American media and British media, is not going to discuss, because globalization is a very dangerous phenomenon. And at the same time, the coronavirus has demonstrated the importance of borders, of security, of nation states. And incidentally, in Britain and America, the word border, along with the words culture and religion, are regarded as dirty words, which is not just idiocy, but it is absolutely laughable. Now, will the coronavirus result in the downfall of globalization, in the downfall of the New World Order, which has been in existence since the end of the Soviet Union and of Soviet communism? I believe not. Why? Firstly, because there is an assumption that the ordinary man and woman in the West, principally in Britain and America, has made the connection between the emergence of and the spread of the coronavirus and globalization. And in the case of the European Union, without borders. So that is a dangerous assumption. The second reason why I do not believe it will result in the end of globalization is that there is no alternative to globalization. Ever since the end of Soviet communism, capitalism has manifested itself today, has evolved in itself today to corporate capitalism. And one of the dimensions of corporate capitalism is, of course, globalization. So there is no alternative in the world.
But that's a very interesting comment, Dima. I mean, I'm not suggesting that globalization is going to go away because of the coronavirus. I'm not saying that. Mm-hmm. What I'm saying is, taking on board what Marcus just said, is that we have to take note of its weaknesses and how it needs to be adjusted. I don't think we can turn the clock back 40 years, okay? No. But at the same time, this horrible event that is affecting the world on a scale that is only increasing. And and later in this week on this program, we're going to talk about the economic consequences of it. But it does beg the question: is it really working that well, and what needs to be adjusted so we can avoid such a pandemic? Because there will be other pandemics. This is a test case on how to leverage what we have now and what needs to be done in the future. Go ahead.
Well, I agree with Marcus that the nature of modern capitalism is expansion. Expansion in everything, not only in territory. For example, a lot of people blame for the coronavirus the eating habits of the Chinese. But didn't we hear from the Western experts that we should consume insects, we should change our food patterns, we should expand and expand, the sphere where humans interfere with nature. Basically, it's becoming more or less clear that this virus was a result of human interference in nature. It was not produced by nature itself. So we see how this system is fragile, because not only is it affected by destruction, the stop in the spread, the stop in expansion is already a tragedy. People are losing money, industries stop. This system is vulnerable.
But let me go back to Marcus. I guess maybe to fine-tune my comment, introductory comments, that is that we have globalization, and that's a very broad brush. But I think kind of Dima's kind of teasing a little bit of what I'm talking about here. I mean, this is a corporatization globalization, because when countries have to react to this pandemic, they have, all of them have a different toolbox, and they're not necessarily connected, and we've seen today the inability to contain it. I mean, globalization in a very broad sense would seem to suggest that, but we don't have that because it's more of a corporate-driven globalization. Go ahead, Marcus.
Well, let me make a case in point, Peter. Look at Russia. Russia has borders, and rigorously defended borders. Look at the decisive steps that the Russian authorities took to confront and contain the coronavirus. Once it had spread from China, straight away the Russian authorities took the responsible decision and closed its borders. And if the European Union, and if Britain, now that Britain is out of the European Union, had proper borders, if they had properly secure and defended borders, then maybe, Peter, maybe there would not be the situation that there is today in, for example, Italy and Germany and Britain regarding the coronavirus. So I believe that the Russian authorities have demonstrated the absolute necessity of having borders.
Okay, Marcus, let me ask you a question then. So you're telling me, I'm extrapolating from what you just said, is that Western elites and their vision of globalization, their ideology trumps public safety. Is that what you're telling me?
Oh, absolutely.
Well, good. That's what I'm thinking as well. Go ahead.
Absolutely. Let me expand on that, Peter. Who has been one of the beneficiaries of the coronavirus? Western media, because Western media should have created an atmosphere of awareness and calm about the coronavirus. They should have told the British public, the American public, that a new virus has emerged. It is potentially fatal. It could become a pandemic, but you must remain calm and you must put it into perspective, because year in, year out, for well over 100 years now, the world has been living with a pandemic in the form of influenza. That would have been the actions of a responsible media. But alas, British mainstream media and American mainstream media did not do that. They deliberately created an atmosphere.
They flamed it, inflamed it.
And yes, and what has happened, Peter? In Britain, for example, the sale of newspapers has increased. The amount of clicks on newspaper websites has gone up. Advertising space in newspapers.
So let me go to Dima here. So exactly. So Dima, so even the business model for media trumps public safety. Okay, we could go on and on and on. Go ahead, Dima.
Well, I can just give you an example. The Hill, an American publication, they published an article. U.S. paints a murky picture of Russian disinformation of coronavirus. So Russia deliberately misinformed the U.S. public about coronavirus.
But the article in itself is misinformation.
Well, the article quotes Assistant Secretary of State for Europe and Eurasia, Philip Rieker, saying, Russia's intent is to sow discord and undermine U.S. institutions and alliances from within, including through covert and coercive malign influence campaign. By spreading disinformation about coronavirus, Russian malign actors
is that one example cited in the article that you could find of misinformation, Dima?
As usual, they cite a report which is classified. The public cannot see it. They are not providing any evidence, any facts, but that's not an individual case. It's not a separate case. In Europe, Der Spiegel magazine, they publish an article headlined, "When Coronavirus Meets Putin Crisis." Putin is Putin and Erdogan. So they accuse Putin and Erdogan of weaponizing migration, driving huddled masses to Europe. Immediately, it reminded me of a headline in The Economist a few years ago, "Let the huddled masses in." And now Der Spiegel says it's Putin and Erdogan who are sending all these refugees.
But there's, Marcus, if you've been listening to that, I mean, there's no self-reflection of the malign foreign intervention into Arab lands, Muslim countries that created these migration waves in the first place. This is just how myopic Western media is. That their countries create these problems, their media blames these problems on a third party that wasn't involved in it in the first place. I mean, it is so circular, so self-satisfying, and again, a business model that praises ideology over the public welfare of people. Go ahead, Marcus.
Absolutely, Peter. The world is witness to the emergence of a new virus. It can be fatal. It could become a pandemic, but we have to see it in perspective. Since the beginning of 2020, 15 million Americans have fallen victim to influenza. A few years ago in Britain, in the winter from 2017 to 2018, 50,000 British people died from the flu. So we have to be aware about the coronavirus. We have to adhere to basic hygiene behavior. For example, washing your hands thoroughly after the toilet or when you come back from the shops or from a bar or from a restaurant. But I am not going to let British mainstream media, which is a pathological lying outfit, create fear and panic in my mind. After all, these are the people who claim that Saddam Hussein had weapons of mass destruction. These are the people who claim that mass murder had been committed in Bosnia and in Libya and in Kosovo. They are compulsive liars, and they do it deliberately in order to achieve a financial win for themselves. They are despicable creatures.
Yeah, and you know what the biggest loser is, as we end this segment here, is public confidence in the end in the media itself. It's a circular, vicious circle here. Marcus Papadopoulos, thank you for joining us in London. We're going to go to a short break, and after that short break, we'll continue our discussion on some real news. Stay with RT. Welcome back to Crosstalk, where all things are considered. I'm Peter Avell. To mind you, we're discussing real news. And now to Nicosia, where we're joined by Alex Christoforou. He's the director and writer for theduran.com. Welcome to the program, Alex. We see in the first part of the program, which I know that you listened to when we had Marcus Papadopoulos, we talked about the globalization and the pandemic and how we have to reassess globalization, or at least we should, in my opinion. But let's bring it a little bit closer to the U.S. domestic politics here. Donald Trump up for re-election. The Democrats have all but anointed their nominee, Joe Biden. And it looks like to me that the Democrats and their pliant media are going to make this entire election going to the conventions and to the general in November as a referendum on Trump's handling of the coronavirus. Is that a good play on their part? Because let's be honest here, Trump has not presented his best face when it comes to talking about how his administration is dealing with this pandemic. He's good at rallies. He's not good with the teleprompter. Alex and Nicosia.
Yeah, I agree with that. I think that the Trump administration started very, very slow to handle this. And the big sign was with the testing. There was just a lack of testing kits and people weren't getting tested. Now I think they've got everything ramping up now and a little bit more under control. That Wednesday Oval Office teleprompter speech to the American public, I agree with you, Peter, was absolutely awful. That was terrible. And the markets reacted and the people reacted. I think we saw a lot of panic because that environment for Trump is not beneficial to Trump. Trump needs to interact with people. He is not good talking in front of a machine. Trump wants interaction, even negative interaction. Even the press going at him is where he thrives. So I think that latest press conference he gave at the White House with the media there, with his team behind him, I think we saw a much more confident and a much more secure Trump. And we saw a little bit more leadership. And we saw Trump in an environment that suits him. I think he needs to stay away from the Oval Office, period, as this crisis unfolds. Interact with people, speak with people, have some give and take with the press, answer their questions, push back. And I think people will start to feel a little more secure, and there'll be a little less panic, because the United States and the world now needs to see some leadership. And God knows we're not going to get it in Europe. That's for sure. So the only leader that I can think of right now in the Western world is Trump. And I think he really needs to deliver on this. He started out very, very poorly. But hopefully after that press conference in the White House, things will start to get under control. That's my hope, Peter.
No,
but we have to see this unfold.
Yeah, I mean, and of course, I mean, I think all of us have to step back. I mean, they're watching American media. There, unfortunately, there's so many people that want to score points and not really address the real issue, and it's a pandemic, okay? And that's why it's very frustrating watching American media, because it's all about politics for them. It's not about people, as usual, okay? That's why Trump got elected in the first place. You know, Dima, the media's presentation of it, just some of what we just heard from Alex and what we heard from Marcus in the first part of the program here, they're doing a huge disservice to the public, because they've weaponized this issue in a way that is to their own benefit, that serves their own ideological interests, and it's not addressing the real problem. One of the real problems is the patchwork of American medicine, okay? There is no national medicine, and it's basically individual corporations. So no wonder it's very difficult for this administration, because they have to talk not to just the officials in the administration, but officials in the administration that are talking to the corporate world. They're not all on the same page, and they all in the corporate world will never move away from their bottom line. That's one of the difficulties. Alex brought it up, the lack of testing. That's from a corporate point of view. Go ahead.
Well, again, just a few facts. Weeks before this pandemic started, Pentagon asked for $740 billion. For what? You know, we read the newspapers. The primary targets are Russia and China. So a tiny fraction of this money could have provided thousands, millions of tests, and the coronavirus would not be such a great danger right now. And no one is talking about that. And Pentagon will most likely get its $700-something billion.
I would make a wager with you, Dima, that the Pentagon every year wastes more money than all of the money times 10 that will be spent on dealing with this pandemic in the United States. What do you bet?
And we see that basically, there is no universal free health care in the United States. And this system seems to be working. Now we see that it's not working, Wealthy people get infected because they go to bars more often, they meet more often. Working people are sometimes just glued to their workplaces. And who gets infected? The wife of the Canadian Prime Minister, lots of people in the media world, lots of people in the artistic world. We see how unprotected the rich have become simply because they were so greedy that they provided no health service to the immigrants. No health service.
That's a really good point. Let me go back to Alex and Nicosia. I mean, again, this pandemic, it's poor people, it's elderly people, in the case of the United States, people that are not insured or underinsured, and so people are going to stay home. The rich and powerful, the
home office owners.
All of Silicon Valley, because they'll call up Uber and they'll bring in their food, bring in their dry cleaning. But what about the Uber driver, okay, and the dry cleaner and all that? See, this, again, watching how the administration reacted to this, I suppose if you own a lot of stocks, you're going to be really worried about the stock market. But the stock market exists because there is an economy, and an economy exists because it has to serve the people. And they got all of their priorities all out of order, and this pandemic shows it glaringly. Go ahead, Alex.
Yeah, and I mean, I think, when the pandemic runs its course, however long that's going to take, absolutely the United States should stop and reflect. Are they going to do it? Most likely not, because they don't stop and reflect when it comes to regime change wars. And like Dima said, the military spending, the military budgets. So I doubt when this pandemic runs its course, the U.S. will have an open and honest debate about healthcare. Now, it doesn't matter where you lie on the spectrum with healthcare. There's no doubt that the United States should reassess and discuss their healthcare structure. But Peter, the whole idea here is that this pandemic is shutting down everything in the United States, but it's playing into the media's hands and it's playing into Biden's hands. It's perfect for them to not have Biden speaking. It's perfect for them to have Biden hidden away. And it goes against Trump to not have Trump at rallies and speaking. So going forward in all of this, what you're seeing right now is a pandemic that the media is going to utilize and capitalize on, that Biden's going to utilize and capitalize on, because Biden now can just give 5-minute internet speeches and internet live streams, and he can disappear. And even there, he's shaky. And Trump can't go out to those rallies and to those big events and play up to his base. So the optics right now really work towards Biden and really work against Trump. The healthcare debate is something that Sanders could have capitalized on if Sanders wasn't so weak. That's the main issue. This plays into Sanders' hands as well, but Sanders is gone now. He's gone. He's out of it. Biden, like you said, is the anointed one.
One even has to wonder, and I think it's a serious question to ask, is that will there even be conventions? Will they just be, avatar conventions? Okay, will they be done through Skype? I mean, you're bringing up a very serious point here, because it's actually controlling. The media has the ability now to completely control the narrative. They can turn people on and they can turn other people off in an instant.
And Biden won't talk about healthcare. I mean, if people think that Biden's going to do something with healthcare,
he's already said he wouldn't.
About it.
He's already said he wouldn't. Dima.
Well, it's just laughable. This week the American media was full of concern about Russia. Putin has got a chance to run another time. Putin is going to be the president for life. For God's sake, Biden is 11 years older than Putin. And the United States is perfectly happy with him being the next president. And if you read the media, 90% of the media wants this guy, 11 years older than Putin, being the next president of the United States. So it's just absurd. It's laughable. The problems that these people in the media invent, like Russian influence, Russian mending, and they miss the really big problem, the coronavirus.
Well, Dima, what they really miss is the elites meddling in the American election.
Absolutely.
That's where the real meddling is here. Alex, that's just it for me. It's fascinating. Is that, well, the primary's over. We should cancel the rest of them. It's Joe Biden. This is just this. They're snowballing you. Okay, they're gaslighting you. It's like it's all over. Okay, it's as if because the Trump administration did such a bad job, he should just resign and we should just anoint Biden and we've done it, and everything will go back to 2015 and everyone will be happy again. I mean, they've gotten everything wrong for the last 4 years. And again, we should step back a little bit. Every single gambit they've played against Trump, they've failed. Will they succeed this time? It's hard to say, but they have enormous resources mobilized around the story. And it's the wrong story. They're not focusing on the pandemic. They're focusing on the politics of the pandemic. Go ahead, Alex.
Yeah, and they're going to get this pandemic wrong as well. There's no doubt about that. And no matter what Trump does, Peter, it's not going to be good enough. No matter what he does.
True. Always
Open
true.
The borders, he's at fault. Close the borders, he's at fault. Stop flights from coming in, he's at fault. Open all the flights, he's going to be at fault. So Trump needs to just block all that stuff out. And I think he's very good at doing that. He needs to focus right now on the short term, the next month or two. He needs to flatten that curve of the pandemic, because we now see from China, from South Korea, and from Italy that this pandemic definitely has a very steep bell curve. He needs to figure out a way, and every country needs to figure out a way to flatten that curve out. The pandemic's going to run its course, but they need to flatten that curve out. They need to delay the spread of the virus, and they need to work on getting people the care that they need for the short term. And then after that, we really, really need to have a discussion in the United States about healthcare. Is anyone going to do it? No. Unfortunately, I don't think so. But in an ideal world, in a perfect world, that would be the course of action, that healthcare would be a big topic going into the presidential election. But with Biden, it's not.
It's a fool's errand to believe that the elites will learn from their mistakes. 20 seconds, Steve, before we finish up.
Well, talking about these statements, now people in the United States can feel what we felt and what people in Iraq felt, what people in Yugoslavia felt when the U.S. media attacked our leaders. Whatever Milosevic did, he was a criminal. Whatever Putin is doing, he's always a criminal. But in reality, the statements from the Western politicians are a lot more responsible. When Angela Merkel, who has stayed in power longer than Putin, since 2004, she is the Chancellor of Germany, when she says that 70% of Germans can be infected, that means 58 million people.
And we're going to follow that story here. That's all the time we have. Many thanks to my guests here in Moscow and in London and in Nicosia. And thanks to our viewers for watching us here at RT. See you next time, and remember, crosstalk rules.